The night my sister told me the greatest gift I could give her was to disappear from our family forever, she said it with a smile. Not an angry smile, not even a cruel one. Just calm, like she was asking me to pass the salt. We were standing in the kitchen of my parents' house in Austin, Texas, surrounded by half-packed wedding decorations and champagne bottles labeled with her name, Emily Carter, bride-to-be. My name wasn't on anything. It never was. Emily was the golden child, the one with straight A's, perfect hair, and a fiancé who drove a Tesla and worked in tech. I was the older sister, the complicated one. Divorced at 29, marketing consultant, no kids, no picture-perfect life, and apparently no place in the family anymore. She closed the refrigerator, leaned against the counter, and looked straight at me. "You know what would make my wedding perfect?" she said softly. I tried to smile. "Not rain?" She shook her head. "If you didn't come, actually, if you just stopped coming around altogether." I laughed. She didn't. "Em, that's not funny." "I'm serious, Hannah." Her voice stayed calm, controlled. "Mom and Dad agree. You change the energy. You make things tense. Ryan's parents already asked questions about your divorce. It's embarrassing." Embarrassing? My chest tightened. "I'm your sister." "And I love you," she said quickly, "but sometimes love means space. A lot of space. Permanent space." I stared at her. She wasn't angry. She had already made peace with erasing me. Then she said the sentence I'll never forget. "The greatest gift you could give me for my wedding is if you disappear from our family." And the worst part? Later that night, my parents asked me to consider it. The family meeting. My mother called it a conversation. My father called it keeping the peace. They sat across from me at the dining table like I was a problem to solve. "Honey," my mom said gently, "Emily's wedding is important. You know how sensitive she is." Sensitive? She just told me to disappear. Dad rubbed his forehead. "It's temporary. Maybe take a break. Move. Start fresh." "Move? I live here." "Not necessarily," Mom whispered. "You work remotely. You could go anywhere." Anywhere. Except home. That's when I understood something terrifying. They weren't shocked by what she said. They had already discussed it. I wasn't being pushed out in the moment. I had been quietly voted off the island. The Last Supper. 2 weeks later, I attended a family dinner. No one mentioned the wedding. No one mentioned what Emily had said. It was like they were waiting for me to volunteer my own exile. And then Emily made a toast. "To new beginnings," she said, raising her glass. "To letting go of things that hold us back." Her eyes locked on mine. And in that moment, something inside me didn't break. It hardened. If they wanted me gone, I wouldn't leave quietly. I would leave completely. The disappearance. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I didn't beg. 3 days later, I packed my apartment, sold my furniture, closed my local accounts. I accepted a 6-month contract in Seattle, Washington, with a startup that had been courting me for a year. I changed my number, deleted social media, blocked everyone, even my parents, especially Emily. I didn't send a goodbye message. I didn't attend the wedding. On the morning she walked down the aisle, I was boarding a flight 2,000 miles away. And as the plane lifted off, I whispered, "Gift delivered." But here's what they didn't expect. They thought I'd disappear quietly. They thought I'd struggle. They thought I needed them. They didn't know that I was the one who had quietly helped Dad refinance the house 5 years earlier using my credit and connections. They didn't know I was listed as a silent co-owner on a small investment property he'd forgotten about. They didn't know how many invisible ways I had been holding that family together. And they definitely didn't expect what would happen 3 months after the wedding. Because sometimes, when you remove the problem from a system, the system collapses. 3 months later, my phone rang at 2:17 a.m. Unknown number. I almost ignored it. Then I answered. Hannah? It was my father. He sounded smaller. What happened? Silence. Then, we need you. Of course they did. When my father said, "We need you," he didn't sound like the man who had calmly suggested I relocate for the sake of family harmony. He sounded afraid, and fear changes everything. What happened? I asked again, sitting upright in my apartment overlooking rainy downtown Seattle. There was heavy breathing on the line. Then, it's the house. Of course it was. The house in Austin, Texas, the one they almost lost 5 years ago when Dad's contracting business tanked. The one I helped refinance using my financial record and a favor from a former client at a regional bank. The refinance that required my signature. The signature they conveniently forgot about when asking me to disappear. What about it? I asked calmly. We're behind, he admitted. There's complications. Complications. Translation, they missed payments. Talk to the bank. We did. And they said if the cosigner doesn't re-engage, they'll move forward. There it was. Cosigner. Not daughter, not family. Cosigner. I closed my eyes. You wanted permanent space, I reminded him gently. Hannah. No, Dad. Emily said the greatest gift I could give her was disappearing. I delivered. He swallowed hard. This isn't about that. It was exactly about that. The perfect wedding, the imperfect marriage. Before hanging up, he dropped something else. Emily's having a hard time. That caught my attention. With what? Silence again. Ryan's parents are pressuring them. Money's tight. The wedding went over budget. Ryan. The golden fiancé, the tech prince, the man whose parents had whispered about my divorce like it was contagious. Turns out, their family wealth wasn't as solid as it looked. After the wedding in Austin, Emily and Ryan had bought a new build house in the suburbs. Big mortgage, big lifestyle, bigger expectations. And apparently, bigger cracks. They've been arguing, Dad said quietly. A lot. I didn't say what I was thinking. When you remove the scapegoat, people are forced to face themselves. What they never understood. Here's what my family never realized. I wasn't the chaotic one. I was the stabilizer, the fixer, the quiet absorber of tension. When Emily panicked before college exams, I wrote her study outlines. When Dad's business dipped, I connected him to clients. When Mom's insurance got complicated after her surgery, I handled the paperwork. I made things smoother. And smooth looks boring next to sparkle, until the sparkle fades. The financial domino. 2 days after my father's call, I received a formal notification email. The mortgage company was initiating review due to missed payments. My name was clearly listed. Co-responsible. Legally exposed. Now it wasn't emotional. It was business. And I'm very good at business. I contacted a lawyer in Texas. Not a family friend. Not someone my parents knew. A shark. Within a week, we uncovered something interesting. When my parents refinanced the house years ago, part of the agreement included shared equity documentation. My contribution, both financial leverage and advisory, had secured me a small but real ownership percentage. They'd forgotten, or ignored it, but legally, it was binding, which meant if foreclosure happened, my credit would suffer, but so would their control, because forced sale would expose the actual ownership structure, including mine. Meanwhile, the marriage. Through a mutual acquaintance, because even when you disappear, small-town connections travel, I learned more. Emily's perfect marriage wasn't perfect. Ryan's job at the tech firm in Dallas wasn't as stable as advertised. He'd exaggerated his role. His income fluctuated heavily with commissions. And his parents? They'd expected Emily's family to contribute more financially after the wedding. Instead, my parents were struggling, which made Emily look less impressive. Status matters in certain circles, and cracks spread fast. The call from her. It happened on a Sunday evening. Unknown number again. I answered. Silence. Then, "You really blocked me?" Emily. Her voice didn't sound golden anymore. It sounded tired. "You asked for permanent space." That was before what? Before reality? Before consequences? Before the spotlight moved? She inhaled sharply. Ryan's parents found out about the house situation. And they're questioning our financial stability. I let that sit. Hannah, I didn't think you'd actually disappear. There it was. She expected drama. She expected begging. She expected me to fight for inclusion. She did not expect absence. "I thought you'd still show up," she whispered. "That's the thing about gifts. Once given, you don't get to return them." She started crying. Not loud, just quiet, controlled cracks. "I didn't mean it like that." "Yes, you did." Silence. Then something shifted in her tone. "Are you going to let Mom and Dad lose the house?" Ah, there it was. Not, "Do you miss us?" Not, "Can we fix this?" But leverage. I leaned back in my chair and looked out at the gray Seattle skyline. "I'm not letting anyone do anything," I replied calmly. "I'm protecting my legal interest." "You're punishing us." "No," I said evenly. "I'm respecting your boundary." The unraveling. Within a month, Dad's business partner backed out of a project. Emily moved back into my parents' house temporarily after a trial separation. Ryan stopped attending family dinners. The house that once felt full of forced smiles now held tension thick as humidity. And I wasn't there to absorb it. That's when Mom called. She didn't ask for money. She didn't ask for help. She asked a different question. "Are you happy?" It caught me off guard. I looked around my apartment, clean, quiet, peaceful. Yes, for the first time in years. Yes. "I think I am," I answered honestly. She started crying. "We didn't realize what we were asking." But they did. They just didn't think I would survive without them. And then came the twist. 2 weeks later, my lawyer called. There was an offer. An investor interested in purchasing distressed properties in the neighborhood, including my parents' house. And because of my ownership percentage, they had to go through me. The number he quoted made me sit up straight. It wasn't just enough to walk away clean. It was enough to start something new, something bigger, something entirely mine. And suddenly, the greatest gift I had given my sister was freedom. The offer was real. Not emotional, not symbolic. Real money. My lawyer in Texas laid it out clearly. A private investor group was buying distressed properties in the Austin, Texas suburbs. The market had dipped slightly. They were moving fast. And because my name was attached to the equity structure, they couldn't close anything without me. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the extra. I was the deciding vote. The number. When he said the figure, I went quiet. After the mortgage payoff and penalties, my share would still leave me with enough to clear my remaining student loans, put a down payment on property in Seattle, Washington, invest in my own consulting firm instead of contracting. It wasn't billionaire money, but it was independence money. And independence hits different when your own family tried to erase you. The emergency family meeting. Without me. I found out later what happened next. The investor contacted my father formally. Dad panicked. Emily panicked harder because if the house sold, two things would become public: my legal ownership stake, the financial instability they'd been hiding. Ryan's parents would know everything. The illusion would shatter, and Emily built her entire identity on illusion. The video call. They requested a family meeting. This time, the offer was real. Not emotional, not symbolic. Real money. My lawyer in Texas laid it out clearly. A private investor group was buying distressed properties in the Austin, Texas suburbs. The market had dipped slightly. They were moving fast. And because my name was attached to the equity structure, they couldn't close anything without me. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the extra. I was the deciding vote. The number. When he said the figure, I went quiet. After the mortgage payoff and penalties, my share would still leave me with enough to clear my remaining student loans, put a down payment on property in Seattle, Washington, invest in my own consulting firm instead of contracting. It wasn't billionaire money, but it was independence money. And independence hits different when your own family tried to erase you. The emergency family meeting. Without me. I found out later what happened next. The investor contacted my father formally. Dad panicked. Emily panicked harder because if the house sold, two things would become public: my legal ownership stake, the financial instability they'd been hiding. Ryan's parents would know everything. The illusion would shatter, and Emily built her entire identity on illusion. The video call. They requested a family meeting, this time on Zoom. I almost declined, but curiosity is powerful. When I logged in, I saw Mom, red eyes, Dad, pale, aging 5 years and 5 months, Emily, no makeup, hair tied back, sitting in what used to be my old bedroom. Poetic. "Hannah," Mom began gently. Emily interrupted her. "Are you really selling the house?" "I'm considering an offer on my equity," I corrected. Dad leaned forward. "We can fix this. Just give us time." "You had time." Emily's jaw tightened. "So this is revenge?" There it was again, everyone assuming my decisions were emotional. "No," I said calmly. "This is accountability." She laughed bitterly. "You vanished on purpose." "You asked me to. You didn't think I'd take it seriously." "And that," I said softly, "is the problem." Silence filled the screen. What I finally said. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I didn't even sound angry. I spent my entire life making myself smaller so you could shine. I fixed things quietly. I absorbed tension. I made sacrifices no one noticed. Emily looked down. You called me embarrassing. You asked me to disappear because I didn't fit the image. She swallowed. And I realized something in Seattle. I wasn't the embarrassment. I was the backup plan. Mom started crying again. Dad stared at the table. Emily's voice cracked. "We were stressed." "No," I replied. "You were comfortable. Comfortable with me carrying weight. Comfortable with me being the extra piece. Comfortable believing I'd never walk away." The truth about Ryan. Then Emily said something unexpected. "Ryan lost his job." I blinked. "When?" "2 weeks after the wedding." So the tech prince wasn't so stable after all. He didn't tell his parents at first. They thought he was still working. We kept up appearances. Of course they did. And now? I asked. We're separating, she said quietly. The golden marriage. 3 months old, already cracked. And suddenly, her request for my disappearance made more sense. She didn't remove me because I was embarrassing. She removed me because she reminded her of something she feared. Failure. I survived divorce. I rebuilt. I didn't crumble when things fell apart. She couldn't stand the possibility of becoming me. The offer counter. After the call, I made a decision. Not emotional, strategic. I told my lawyer to delay the investor for 14 days. Then I made my parents a proposal. I would not force the sale immediately, but if they wanted to keep the house, we would restructure ownership formally. Clear percentages, clear responsibilities, clear repayment terms. No more silent daughter safety net. This would be business. Emily's private call. That night, Emily called again. Not defensive, not entitled, small. I was jealous of you, she admitted. That stopped me. What? You survived things I couldn't imagine surviving, and people still respected you. I thought if you stayed, if you showed up alone, people would compare. I leaned back in my chair. So you erased me. She started crying. I didn't think you'd actually leave. You didn't think I had the strength to. That hurt her. One year after I boarded that flight out of Austin, Texas, I walked back into my parents' house through the same front door I had once quietly exited. Nothing looked different, and yet everything was. The walls were the same soft beige, the chandelier still hung slightly crooked over the dining table, the house still smelled faintly of my mother's vanilla candles. But the energy completely changed, because this time I wasn't walking in hoping to be accepted. I was walking in already whole. The invitation. The invitation came from my mother. Not a demand, not a guilt trip, a request. Thanksgiving won't feel right without you, she'd said. Not, we need you to fix something, just, we want you there. That difference matters. I almost didn't go. Not because I was afraid, but because I no longer needed the room. And when you don't need something, you can finally choose it. So I chose to go. The entrance. When I stepped inside, conversation stopped. Not dramatically, just enough. My father stood first, then my mother. Emily followed a second later. She looked different, simpler, lighter somehow. No designer heels, no perfect curls, no performance. Just Emily. "Hannah," my mom whispered, and this time when she hugged me, it wasn't clingy, it wasn't apologetic, it was equal. The new dynamic. Dinner felt strange at first. Everyone was careful, like I might disappear again if they moved too fast, but something subtle had shifted. Dad asked about my business, and actually listened. Mom asked about Seattle, not in a way that implied I'd come back. Emily asked how I negotiated my last contract. That one surprised me. She wasn't competing, she was learning. The private conversation. After dinner, Emily and I stepped onto the back patio, the same patio where she once planned centerpieces for the wedding I never attended. Cold air, quiet neighborhood, familiar sky. "I owe you more than an apology," she said softly. "You already apologized." I didn't understand it then. I waited. "You built your life around looking successful," she admitted. "Perfect relationship, perfect wedding, perfect image. And when yours collapsed and you survived it, I didn't know how to process that." I studied her face. "You weren't embarrassing," she said. "You were brave, and that terrified me." There it was again. Not jealousy of my failure, jealousy of my resilience. The truth about disappearing. "You know what hurt the most?" she asked quietly. "What?" "That you actually left. No drama, no fighting, just gone." I smiled faintly. "You thought I needed you more than I needed myself." She nodded slowly. "Yeah." A long silence passed between us. Then she asked, "Did you ever think about not coming back?" "Yes." That answer surprised her. "I built a good life, peaceful, stable, mine. Then why come back?" I looked at the house through the glass doors. "Because I don't feel small here anymore." That was the difference. Before, I stayed to belong. Now, I visited by choice. The role reversal. Later that night, something subtle but powerful happened. Dad brought up a new investment opportunity. In the past, he would have explained it to Emily and politely ignored me. This time, he looked directly at me. "What do you think?" The question wasn't symbolic, it was genuine. I analyzed it calmly, pointed out risks, suggested alternatives. No one interrupted, no one dismissed. Emily even took notes. For the first time in our family history, I wasn't the extra, I wasn't the problem, I wasn't the invisible stabilizer. I was respected. The moment I realized I'd won. Not revenge, not dominance, not superiority. Peace. That's what winning actually feels like. Peace without needing validation, power without raising your voice, presence without shrinking. One last conversation. Before I left for the airport, Emily walked me to my rental car. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Sure." "Did you ever think about not coming back?" "Yes." That answer surprised her. "I built a good life, peaceful, stable, mine." Then why come back? I looked at the house through the glass doors. Because I don't feel small here anymore. That was the difference. Before, I stayed to belong. Now, I visited by choice.